it going, everybody? My name is Miguel Johns. I'm a co-founder at Moment. And at Moment, we create results-driven moments between healthcare organizations and their patient populations using social media. And today I'm excited to be presenting on the topic of social media strategies for engaging your patient populations. A little bit of background on myself. I started my company about 6 years ago. I was attracted to the healthcare space because I come from a long family history of people with diabetes. My dad has it, aunts, uncles, both grandmothers. When my grandmother was diagnosed with diabetes, she told me that she wanted to eat healthier. She said from now on, she would no longer be drinking soda, and from now on would only be having fruit juice and chocolate milk, which of course I knew were not healthier options. But I realized there's a significant problem here. There's a lack of understanding in regards to what she needed to do to better manage her health. On top of that, she wasn't participating in any of the offers that the organization she was working with, her doctor or hospital system, and her health insurance. And so that led me down a path of testing many different things that I could bring to the market in the healthcare space that would be able to help people like my grandmother. One thing led to another. We built and launched multiple health apps. We produced thousands of bite-sized videos around diabetes, specifically focused on diabetes education. And eventually we landed on social media. Today, we've got two very successful social media pages, Diabetes Care and Diabetes Care Espanol. Our community has grown to over 40,000 people with diabetes. And those 40,000 people watch over 1 million minutes of diabetes education content every year and engage with our information, posts, challenges, giveaways over 3 million times a year. So we realized we had tapped into something. What were we doing that allowed us to have such success on social media? And how can other healthcare organizations begin applying those same principles so that they can build their own communities that allow them to increase the engagement with the programs that they're offering? And so I'll be covering all of that today in our presentation. So the first question I always get is, who's on social media? Older generations probably aren't on social media, right? Of course, the answer to that is wrong, or else why would I be giving this presentation? 70% of people who are aged 50 to 64 are on a social media platform, and almost half of people over the age of 65 are also on a social media platform. It's actually funny because Facebook has turned into our parents' social media platform. In fact, it would be really, really hard to find anybody under the age of 20 on Facebook. Why? Because their grandparents are on it, their parents are on it, and they don't want to be stalked by their relatives when they're posting on their social media accounts. Social media is here, and all age groups are using it more and more every year. The key to social media is building trust and reducing skepticism. So in the old world of recruiting participants into our programs, we would send them an enrollment letter, we would send them an email, we would call them on the phone. And what we're really doing in those situations, at least in the marketing world, what we know this is the call to action, the buy now, enroll for our program, start on this device. And the problem is only 3% of the market or population is ever ready to buy now at any given moment. In fact, the majority of the population is not even problem aware. We know this in the diabetes space. 90% of people don't even know they have diabetes. 20% of the people are problem aware, and 17% of them are gathering information to make the best decision moving forward. Where we fail in calling somebody, sending them an email, or sending them a letter is in the process of delivering value, building trust, reducing skepticism. That is required to move these people down the spectrum. Social media offers us a new and unique way to accomplish this mission. So when we start thinking about our social media strategies, we need to start with the understanding that the number one goal for us developing a social media community is to build trust and reduce skepticism. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's break it down into 5 key steps. Step number 1 is we need to see our audience, your audience. Step number 2 is we need to speak their language. Step number 3 is we need to be 100% unique, tapping into our own personal stories as well as our organization stories. Step 4 is determining how we're going to show up. And step 5 is related to a story that I will tell when we get to the end of the presentation. First things first, we need to see our audience. How do you see your audience on social media? Well, for us, we spent weeks and weeks and months going through comments, looking at likes, looking at what pages were followed, looking at the groups our users were participating in. And that opened our eyes to 2 things. One, how our users were communicating on these social media platforms, what words they were using, what problems they were expressing, how they were connecting to each other. And 2, how the platform was communicating back to the audience. This allowed us to see and understand what the pain points were and how the different entities and stakeholders on the social platforms were communicating about those problems. This is sometimes a time-consuming process. Luckily for you as a healthcare professional, you have deep insights to these problems already. You just need to understand how your audience communicates about these things on a social platform. You might use urinate in your medical office, but if your audience says pee, then you have to use pee in a social setting. It gets a little tricky, but if you just pay attention and you focus on seeing your audience and how they're expressing themselves on the platforms, you'll gain a ton of insight and leverage some assets that you can use moving forward to deliver value through your own social channels. Next, you need to speak the language. And I don't mean English, Spanish, Mandarin. I mean, how are these social platforms communicating to the audiences, and what's working best? Well, on Facebook alone, there are 13 billion videos viewed every day. That tells me that my social media strategy needs a little bit of video. If that's what people are going to Facebook to watch, I've got to include it. That doesn't mean you eliminate blogs or articles or pictures. It just means the language of these platforms changes based on which platform you're on. Understanding which platform you're going to use and understanding how that platform best communicates content to the audience is key. Understand the language so that you can start to speak it. If you see your audience, you know what they're talking about, you pick a platform, you know the language it speaks, you can start marrying these 2 factors together, and you now are developing a content strategy that you can use moving forward. Remember, the name of the game for social media is build trust, reduce skepticism. The only way we can do that is by delivering value, showing up for our audience. And to show up and deliver value, we need to know what the heck we're going to talk about and how the heck we're going to talk about it. Next, you need to be unique. And this comes down to, who are you? Why'd you get into healthcare? Why'd you get into helping people with diabetes? I told my story about how my dad has diabetes, grandmother has it. I've got a unique story about how I started this business and understand the diabetes space as well as social media. That's a story I can tell now. That's unique to me. I can share a picture with me and my father. I can hop on a video with my grandmother. These are all the things I need to leverage that are going to help me stand out on my social media platform. So I always ask, who are you? Why diabetes? Why healthcare? And understanding that will help you take the next steps on your social media journey. Because when we're building trust, yes, we're delivering value, we're reducing skepticism by delivering that value, but we're also becoming personable. Social media is a digital tool. You don't get to see people face to face. So the only way you can really build a relationship is by being unique. Tell your story, and not just your story, your organization's story, your patient population stories. These are all very powerful, very relatable for our audience, and will allow you to build up your asset base, your ammunition that is necessary to continue to show up on social media. Because nobody wants to come across a page where you post once and then it's ghost for 2 weeks, and then maybe you show up again and maybe you don't. You need to have a foundation of things you can pull from so that you can show up consistently, persistently, and generously. And step 1 of that is understanding what your audience is talking about. Step 2 is how are you going to communicate and solve those problems. And step three is how you're going to tell your story so that people can relate to you. How are you going to tell your organization story? How are you going to tell more stories around your patient population? All of that is going to be absolutely necessary for you to have success. So do not hold back on your own story. Be unique, understand what you do well, understand why you do it, understand what's important to you, and you'll be in a good place to start mapping out your content strategy for social media. Once you know who you are and what you want to talk about and what your audience is interested in, you need to discover how you're going to show up. And I mentioned that quick stat earlier where there are 13 billion videos viewed on Facebook every single day. That just tells me that video is one great option for delivering content on social media. And one key aspect around video is it's about authenticity, not quality. Everybody always asks me, do I need to hire a production firm? Do I need a cameraman? Do I need this new setup or this? Our most successful content, and this is after over 1 million minutes of content viewed, not 1 million views, 1 million minutes, 20,000 hours. The best performing content is recorded right on a cell phone of somebody really telling a real story. It's about authenticity, especially in today's world. Our distrust of things on the internet is rapidly increasing. So focus on authenticity. And another piece of why just being authentic is more important is just the efficiency aspect. It's too expensive. It takes too long to do all of these things in the highest quality. Yeah, you may put out one great commercial a year where you spend months and thousands of dollars, but most of the content should be focused on authenticity instead of quality, especially when it comes to video. Next, you can do written. Words can be brought to life with different designs. They can be brought to life with blogs, news articles, things like that. Written content is still extremely important. All of this is as old as communication itself. We've been writing things down since we've been tracking history. That's how we did it. We also communicated each other through talking to each other and things like that. But the written aspect of all of this cannot be forgotten. Do not feel bad for writing out multiple paragraphs in a social media description. Your audience wants to connect with that. They want to hear the stories. The one thing I would say is focus on being story-based. If you're going to teach about carbs, tell a story about how one of your patients was able to master managing their carb intake, which lowered their glucose levels, and why that was important. Don't just start with, here's how you measure carbs, and these are the types. All of your written content should be story-based because we learn from stories. There's a reason attention spans are going down rapidly, yet we will still sit through a movie any day of the week that's 2.5 hours long. It's because the movie is story-based. When we focus on our written content, it needs to be story-based. Spend the time writing out the long descriptions, spend the time writing out the blogs, and then figure out how to repurpose that information in as many different ways as you can, telling stories the entire way. That's how you leverage the written content that you put out. And finally, we have audio. Audio is a great form of communication in today's world because it's passive. They don't have to sit down and read or watch. They can just listen. They can be driving and listen. They can be waiting in a waiting room and listen. Audio gives us the opportunity to tap into these micro moments that somebody experiences throughout the day. And guess what? Your phone is a perfect recording studio. You don't need a booth, a microphone, a headset. You can turn on your voice recorder on your cell phone and record high quality audio that can deliver value to your audience. All of this goes back to how you can be unique. Being unique doesn't end with your story or your organization's story or your passion and purpose. It also comes down to your skill set, especially on social media. Remember, we need to build trust, reduce skepticism. The only way we can do that is by delivering value consistently, persistently, and generously, showing up for our audience on social media over and over again. To do that, we immediately know in the back of our minds, that could take a lot of time. That could take a lot of effort. How do I become very efficient in this process? And the answer to that is knowing your skills. If you've never recorded a video in your life, it's going to take you a lot longer. It's going to be a lot more difficult. But if you've been a blogger for the last 10 years, you've got an area where you can start It's going to be much easier. You have the know-how and you can begin executing. Make this content process as efficient as possible. To do that, you need to understand who you are, and you need to know how you can communicate leveraging these three different methods, and focus on being authentic, make it as easy as possible, get as much content put together as you can, so that at the beginning of every year, you've got this reservoir that you can just pull from, and you know that your strategies are going to be in line with when your programs are opening up, with when you're trying to recruit more patients to those programs. Make it easy on yourself. Don't make this difficult. Next, we need to learn how to combine social media and traditional means of referring patients to the programs. And what do I mean by that? Well, I like to ask our customers, who is really your community? It's not just the social media community, it's the actual community, like our doctors and our medical systems, like our grocery stores, like our churches. Maybe it's Facebook groups. Our social media efforts are going to bring half the piece of the puzzle, but we're also going to be collecting referrals, building relationships within our community to bring the other half, and other social media pages. We have a client who has done an amazing job at providing multiple community partners, like boys and girls clubs, like churches, like grocery stores, with assets they can use on their social media page that drives back to theirs. It's about leveraging what you have. This goes back to the being unique, understanding your traditional means of referrals and connecting them into the social media strategy. If I normally get all my referrals from a doctor, but that's slowing down, they're only bringing 3 people per class I run, well, it may be beneficial to let the church or the grocery store or the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA know about your new social media page where you're putting out free information, building relationships, delivering value, so that they can start driving their communities to that page as well. So leverage your community. Your goal is to become the word of mouth authority figure in your area. If you could block out a square around the surrounding area around your program, whether it's your city, your town, or your county, whatever that is, you want to become the authority figure that when somebody thinks diabetes help or diabetes services, you pop into their mind. And the best way to do that is to be showing up on social media, not only yours, but on your community partners' social medias as well. Which brings me to a great story. The story of the art class. Now, this will kind of bring full circle all the things that we've been talking about, but there's an art class, and the teacher decided to divide the art class into 2 sections. The first section, he told he wanted them to develop the absolute best looking bowl that they could. He wanted them to spend the entire semester developing this bowl. The second half of the class, he told, I want you to create as many bowls as possible. So don't turn in 1 bowl at the end of the year. I want you to turn in 100 bowls. As you can probably guess by now, at the end of the year, who had the best looking bowl? Was it the half of the class who focused on 1 bowl for the whole semester? Or was it the half of the class who focused on creating as many bowls as possible, hundreds of bowls? Well, the answer now is obvious. It's the class that created hundreds of bowls. Why? Because with every bowl, they could learn from their mistakes. They could see how they can make the next bowl better. And by making lots of bowls, they learned over time what the best bowl formula and process was for them. The class that focused on just creating 1 bowl never really learned anything. They focused all their time on trying to make that bowl. And by the end of the year, they've seen all the mistakes they had made, but it was too late. This relates to our social media strategy perfectly, because we want to start creating content. We want to start telling our story. We want to start getting stuff out there so that we can learn. You're not going to have the best social media strategy the first time out. You're going to have to learn what your audience likes, how they're communicating, what resonates, how you can build more and more trust, what stories you can tell. And to do that, you need to be making lots of bowls. You need to be putting out content. Do not think that because your content isn't professionally done or doesn't look as good as it could or is missing some information that you'll have a few weeks later. Get the content out there, start testing immediately, because at the end of the semester, the people who put out more posts, the people who make more bowls are going to have the better content overall, simply because you're getting more shots on goal. So to recap, step number one, see your audience. Understand the social media pages, understand the comments that are being said, the groups that are being joined, the pages that are being followed and shared. You got to see your audience and you got to take the time to do so. Step number two is you got to speak the language, not only the language of your audience, but the language of the platforms. If you're on Facebook, that's different than if you're on YouTube. That's different than if you're on TikTok. Speak the language and understand how your audience speaks it, as well as how the platform speaks it to your audience. Step number three is be unique. Tell your story, tell your program story, understand your skill sets, understand your patient population story, understand your community, because all of that makes you unique so that you can position yourself as an authoritative figure in the mind of your audience, which means when somebody's got a diabetes need, they're going to come your way. Step number four, how will you show up? You can make videos, you can write content, you can record audio, you can do all three. The main key point for step four is mastering efficiency. You need a lot of content to show up regularly, persistently, generously. And to do that, you need to master efficiency. You can't spend $5,000 on one video that's going to take 3 months to prepare. You've got to know, how can I get a video out tomorrow? How can I get a blog out by next week? How can I share a picture immediately? That all comes back to your uniqueness. That comes back to speaking the language and seeing your audience. So step four is an accumulation of the first three, plus the ability to get really focused on what you do well already. And then step number five, remember the art class story. You want to get shots on goal. You want to make as many bowls as possible this semester. You don't want to focus on making one perfect bowl, because at the end of that process, you're going to see all the mistakes in it, and it's going to be too late to go back. I know that was a lot. I am here for questions, of course, to answer anything I can, but I'm also here to give away a free guide. I will be posting the link to that guide in the chat. Just drop your email. I'll send you that guide right over. It's going to give you all these steps, plus more, some use cases, some examples, some ideas, so that you can start building your social community, so that you can start driving more participants to your program, which the only way to do that on social media is to build trust and reduce skepticism. And we do that by delivering value consistently, persistently, and generously. That's all I got. My name is Miguel Johns. Thank you so much for taking the time.